to me, it really doesn't matter how you well, I shouldn't. That's not true. It doesn't matter how you provide. 'Cause you want to do it legally. um, but I mean, a job is a job, right? None of us go to work because, oh, I'm so excited to go. I don't care if they pay me today. I love my job. That's not
Right.
true, right? They
Yeah.
wouldn't call it a job if that's what it was.
Yeah.
Um, but it's what's the best way to provide for your family without taking the least amount of time away from your family.
Welcome to the Fatherhood Chronicles, where we're on mission to discover what it takes to be the best fathers.
Today's interviewee is pretty cool. He's actually come up with the perspective. He's already retired, and next month he celebrates 40 years of marriage with his wife. And with all his time, his favorite thing to do right now is just watch his 7 grandkids grow up.
Yeah, and last guest left us with the advice to always put your wife first. Put your wife first in everything, and in that, you'll become a better husband and a better father. I'm Caleb.
And I'm Logan. All right, we are super excited today to bring on Matt Buffum. Matt, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
We are super excited. We're going to get in. You're going to get to tell us a little bit about your story through some of our questions. But before we dive too far in, we just wanted to give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself. I know you, but Caleb doesn't. Anybody else watching doesn't know. So do you just want to share a little bit about who you are?
Sure. My name is Matt Buffum. I am 60, 61 this year coming up.
Congrats.
Thank you, I think. The health starts to turn pretty soon, so that's what happens. But I've been married for 40 years next month.
Wow.
We have 3 kids, all adults, 7 grandkids total. Been an incredible journey through the whole process. I have lots of ups and downs and things I've learned over the years, and I try to pass that on as best I can. I worked in the oil business for 30 years, which gave me the opportunity to retire early. And my wife and I decided we need to take full advantage of that opportunity and retire early and try to really enjoy life as long as we can, as healthy as we can before the older part of life tends to come and slows you down more.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So how many kids do you have?
We have 3 kids. I got 2 boys and a girl. Trip me up my ages here. So my oldest will be 39 in May, and then 37, just turned 37 in July, and my daughter will be 35 in June.
So you're just turning 61, 40 years of marriage next month, and you have a 39-year-old. So you got married and had kids pretty young then.
Yes. I got married. I was 20.
Okay.
Couldn't legally drink at my own reception. And then we decided that we wanted to start a family early. So we did what we could for the first however many months of marriage, and we're like, hey, okay, we're ready. And we got started. So we started pretty early, which was, to me, a positive because we were young, had the energy for a lot of those things.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So you mentioned that you were in the oil fields. When did you get into that? Did you get into that right after high school, or?
Actually, I wanted to be an architect out of high school. I took architectural classes in high school. Didn't pan out for the future, but I actually worked for an architectural firm shortly after college. And I was a grunt, just learning how to draw and having fun doing it. We were pregnant and going, oop, I don't make enough to provide for my family this way. So then I started looking for other things. I had a friend who connected me with a job that jumped to another job, that jumped to another job. So eventually I got into the oil business, and that was like the saving grace for our family, because then I truly could work one job.
Yeah.
And my wife was home with the kids.
So were you a oil field worker or a rig worker? Or?
Actually, I worked in a refinery.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. I have a buddy that works up in Purdue Bay, but he works on a rig, and I think he's actually a truck driver. So he just rides big rigs all day. So that's always fascinating to me. He did that right out of high school. His dad works up there in Alaska, but so yeah.
I don't want to drive a rig. It's a little more dangerous to me than what I was doing.
Oh, yeah. I bet.
Yeah.
What was the time frame that you worked until you were able to retire with that company?
I was 27 when I started there. So I worked there till 56 and a half. My kids had already all moved up to the northern Idaho area, the northeast, I guess, northwest, up to this area. And then so my wife wanted to come up here. So I actually worked my last 3 months remotely before I physically truly retired. And then I still consult from time to time, helps pay for some of the fun stuff.
So about 30 years you were with that company.
Yes, 30 years.
Wow.
Or just short of 30 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
Did you stick with the same thing, or did it ever get like stagnant and boring through those years?
Um,
How did you stay interested?
well, had to stay. That's an interesting question because it's not always about being interested in work, right? It's
Yeah.
we work because it pays the bills.
Right, that's
Right?
true.
We all would love to say we love our jobs, and at times I did love my job, but most of the time I hated my job because it took me away from my family.
Yep.
But it paid the bills, and so that was the thing to do. I started out my first 7 years. I was a shift worker, so I was gone a ton. My wife was forced to do a lot of things on her own with the kids without me, which was really hard. And part of the struggles in our marriage was those early years of I wasn't home a lot. And then I got onto a day shift job that was almost kind of a threat from her. Our oldest son was as tall as she was. And he's like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. Wait till your dad gets home. And that was always a bad situation. And so that kind of helped curtail my ambitions, I guess, to get on straight days so I could be a normal Monday through Friday kind of a worker. I was home every evening, every weekend. And then just as different opportunities came up within the refinery, I just took advantage of those that I was excited about. I love training and teaching. And so I got my first job was a training position. And then I went in more to an incident investigation position, which is good and bad because it was great for my learning. It was bad for my kids because I didn't just take the word that they said always, this is what's going on. It's like, let's get a little deeper because this doesn't sound like the truth.
Yeah.
So great in parenting. My kids probably didn't think it was so great because, again, they had a hard time getting away with stuff. But just progressed over the years of using my personality and my strengths into my position worked out really well.
That's cool.
So you're into 3 adult children raised. Once you guys, obviously you guys at one point decided to stop having kids. Did you guys ever think about having more kids?
Oh, no. So, okay, early years, right? My wife wanted to have, probably 6. She always wanted a big family. She loves lots of kids. I was raised, I was the youngest of 5, so I understand big family dynamics there. But my wife is a smaller, she's a petite woman. On our 3rd pregnancy, our doctor basically told us, this is it, your body can't handle anymore. She is so petite. I'm getting probably too detailed information here, but such a small bone structured individual, she couldn't deliver naturally. So they were all C-sections. And they basically said, 3, you're done. So we made the decision while she was, I think 5 months pregnant, I went and got a vasectomy. The doctor who was doing the vasectomy says, I refuse to do this because you're younger than my son. And I'm like, well, look, my wife is pregnant in the waiting room. We got 2 kids running around your waiting room. We're done.
Yeah.
And he agreed. So we did it.
Wow.
We've had the conversation, how I had a very similar conversation with the doctor. It's kind of funny how doctors notice and they're not dumb.
Right.
So
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I think they think young kids go in, they want to do that to have not be able to have kids. And they're like, no, you're going to make a bad decision. It's like, no, I think I know what decision I'm making. So how old were you when you had your last kid or when you got your vasectomy, I guess? Same thing.
Same thing. Yeah. 1990. So I was 27.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
There's a thing I saw was, you'll know when you're done having kids. Like, it's not going to be, if you think you want to have kids, like more, it's like, maybe we should wait a little bit and see if we want to. Then you should still have more kids if you're questioning it, but you'll know when you're done. And especially when a doctor says you can't do it anymore.
I was going to say, when a doctor says that's pretty much, you're done.
Well, I mean, you sit back and you say, how important is my wife in the process of this whole thing?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of going, yeah, her health, her life is more important than saying, oh, let's gut out a couple more.
Yeah.
To be totally honest, to me as a young father, I was not like, yay, kids, let's have kids, let's go crazy. That was more my wife's push. I'm like, I will provide, I will do my part. My self-reflection to sit back and say, I don't think I was a great dad in those early years. I worked hard to be a good provider for my family because that's what I was taught. I feel like I'm a much better grandparent than I was ever a parent.
Yeah.
So just so that everybody watching understands what you come from, what's your background, belief, religion look like? What do you have anything that you believe in terms of higher power?
So absolutely. I was raised a Catholic.
Mhm.
I don't know what the right word is. We were at church every Sunday. My parents were very involved, yet we didn't really practice that at home. So I wouldn't say I grew up really knowing. I knew all the things I was supposed to do, but not why I was supposed to do anything. And then my wife and I were exposed to Christianity shortly after we were married. We got involved in a church and started to grow in the process. And that to me, I would sit back and say to me, I am a Christian. I believe very strongly in Jesus Christ and what He went through for me. And so a lot of the things that we stand on today is based on our belief in what God has done for us, what we're supposed to do. I can't say again that was as predominant early years in our marriage because we were baby Christians and didn't really know what we were doing.
Mhm.
But through the maturity and learning, that obviously has changed.
Was there a certain pull that brought you from Catholic into Christian in general, or was it just a growth phase for you?
Again, I think the disconnect. I think the as a child seeing that for my family, and not saying for Catholic as a whole, but for my family, um, we just didn't really follow through with a lot of the things. Right? Is again as a rebellious teenager, we went and my sister and I would go and get a bulletin and come home and show it to mom. Hey, we went to church. Check the box. Hey, you went to church. Good job. We didn't go. We just got a bulletin and we left.
Hmm.
Right. The sad part is my parents didn't really ask us, well, what'd you think of the sermon or what'd you think about anything? So it was like, hey, good, you checked a box and you did it. Um, for me, I didn't want that kind of a relationship. I want an actual relationship, just back in how do I learn and grow. And some of our best friends for the last 35 years are people we've met in church that are strong supporters and encouragers of our lives.
So you grew up Catholic. With that, how was your fatherhood figure like? Your father figure, I should say.
So, I mean, my dad was present. He was there. Um, he was very involved in my life. He coached my baseball team, coached my basketball team. I mean, I was doing a lot of things. He was there through all of that. The negativity of that process is I remember, I don't know, it's probably 7 or 8. My dad's coaching our team. We're driving Volkswagen, driving home after game. One of the kids is like, "You're so lucky your dad's the coach." And I remember telling this kid, you don't have to ride home with him after you struck out, after you got an error, after you missed the ball. I got yelled at for all the things you did wrong. And I sat back and go, my dad was very critical. He had very high expectations. Um, in high school, again, I played basketball. I was actually skinny in the beginning part of my life, more like Logan. um, and he'd made every single basketball game. He would keep stats at the games. And then as soon as the game was over, I would see him and he'd go through and kind of go, hey, you missed 4 free throws.
Hmm.
Hey, why'd you foul this guy? What were you thinking? Not, hey, great job for scoring 20 points, getting 15 rebounds. It was all the things I did wrong. And I think he had such high expectations. So it's like, I'm trying to set the bar very high for you. But it didn't come across that way as a kid. Like, all you're doing is beating me down for the things that I didn't do. So that was my kind of, I think my critical beginnings with my kids, I think that was part of that process, kind of going, you should be perfect in everything you do.
Hmm.
Not realization of, hey, you're kids, right? You need to learn and grow and learn.
Yeah. And be kids.
And be kids.
Yeah.
That's how your father was throughout. Did you have anybody outside of your father that was helpful in terms of a mentor for being a husband, being a father throughout your life, or was it mostly just what you saw from your dad?
It was pretty much from my dad. The advantage I had 2 older brothers that are 8 and 9 years older than I am.
Hmm.
And so I got to see some from them and as they started out in their parenting. So that was all obviously pretty far ahead of me. But for actually a role model in the beginning, that's pretty much was my dad. Again, good and bad. He had a lot of strengths, but some of the weaknesses are some of the things that I've unfortunately passed on with as I've grown up and dealt with and tried to grow through.
That's fair.
Now, how do I segue into that? Have you been a mentor to anyone? Do you have anyone that you've mentored and kind of walked through life, kind of maybe brought to Christ or showed them the way?
I have poured into people's lives, truly like mentored someone. I don't know that I've truly mentored, like, hey, we're meeting, we're walking through all the time. We go through seasons of things. I'll kind of segue a little bit there, but my wife and I teach marriage classes at Real Life, and through that process, we people who come through our class, we ask, hey, would you like to be mentored? If they say, yeah, I'd like to be mentored, we say, hey, we'll come alongside you for the next year, and as things kind of come up, we'll help you navigate the rough waters of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really get into a whole lot of the parenting piece. Um, Marriage is more our kind of our niche, and so we've gone that way. So I have mentored other men from a standpoint and couples from a standpoint of marriage, but from a parenting, fatherhood kind of standpoint, I don't think I've really provided a lot of that. And part of my struggle is, again, I don't remember a lot of the early years. I was working so much, I missed so many things. My wife had to do so much parenting on her own. Again, the first, wow, well, 12 years of our because our oldest was 12 when I finally went to days, and I was done with a lot of my crazy schedule. But I mean, even back to early on, I was working 2 and 3 jobs at a time.
Hmm.
So I'll go back a little farther than that. When we were dating, we both agreed one of us should be home with our kids, and so we said, "Yep, that's what we're going to do." I had the better earning potential, and so I was working. And so once our first son was born, I basically was working 2 and 3 jobs at a time for the next 7 years, 6 years, trying to keep us afloat and ahead of all the bill collectors and people knocking on our doors, until I hit the oil industry. And so that was really that challenge in going through the whole thing. And so I just don't know that I'm sure I would like to think I've helped people over the years, but I don't think I've really been a true mentor from a fatherhood standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe fatherhood is kind of a more niche down version of what you've
Yeah.
done. I would definitely say you've mentored me in ways, and maybe the difference in terms of religion from what I've expressed with you, I think that there's a difference between discipleship and mentorship. And I think you and your wife have mentored me and my wife incredibly. I think that there was opportunity to grow deeper and we could have got to discipleship with you guys, and that never came. But I think mentorship, I think you're not giving yourself enough credit. You've definitely impacted my life a lot, and you helped my wife a lot when we came back and we're working on fixing our marriage after I almost destroyed it. And so I definitely give you the credit of saying you mentor for sure. And
I appreciate that.
yeah.
So, what's your best thing about being a dad?
Again, this is going to sound maybe discouraging for you guys, but the grandparenting phase, so you have to get through the whole parenting phase to get to the grandparenting phase. But the joy that you get from the grandkids is unbelievable. Um, I really enjoy the relationship that I have with my adult children today, which is really encouraging and exciting. And I think that's a reflection of the hard work done earlier in life. But the early years of parenting it's almost like the early years of marriage. It's a challenge trying to figure out, you're doing this dance, and it's like, am I dancing the right direction? Am I dancing with the right person in the process? To me, again, it's I don't want to be discouraging to young dads to kind of go, hey, wait till you're a grandparent, but to sit back and kind of go, the struggles are well worth it if you're fighting the good fight in the process.
So that makes a lot of sense. It's the second time we've actually heard that answer on the show from somebody who has grandkids too. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's your favorite phase. Is there a phase that you enjoy the most? And it could be the grandkid phase, but if you had to summarize, like just categorize down to a certain point, teenage years, youth, that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess teenage years was probably my favorite phase with my boys. Was the hardest phase with my daughter.
That makes sense.
And one of the things that we did is we wanted to be the house where the kids came to. So we had a pool table in the garage. We had a ping pong table under the patio. We had a pool. Obviously, we're not living in Idaho at this time, right? Different state. That was a lot sunnier, a lot longer time. But the friends were at our house. And the other thing that was we just did total goofy type things. So one of the things I love, can't remember what the name of the game was, but we used to call everything Buffum games because it was just, here's another screwball thing that we do. But we would play ping pong with bouncy balls underneath a covered patio. And so it's like you're playing ping pong, but then you're hitting it off the ceiling, you're hitting it off the walls, you're doing whatever you can, and you're still trying to play. And the balls, right? If you can get a little bit of spin on a bouncy ball, boy, it takes off. And we would play with like 100 balls, so it's like you have like a whole stack in your pocket. So because as soon as it's like, oh, that one's gone, get another one. We would do all kinds of stupid, goofy games, and it was fun. Nobody ever got hurt. And then my kids would talk about it, and their friends would want to come over and play and do these stupid
Mm-hmm.
things too. And that to me was one of the best phases because the kids are coming to the house. We're getting to see the friends that they have. Are we engaging like, yeah, this kid, you might want to not, he's fine, welcome at our house, but you're not going to his house.
Yeah.
But you want to be wise in how you're helping them choose friendships, right? Because it's the friends you have around you that help shape and mold you into who you become.
Definitely.
I've told him that actually, that we've had conversations where my goal is to be not, money isn't everything, right? But I want to be the house that my kids want to bring their friends to the same way that you were. And that's one of the things that I've told my wife, and my wife agrees with, is because it's one of the best ways to know who your kids are hanging out with.
Right.
If your kids are always going to someone else's house, you don't know who those parents are, what your kids are doing, and you have to trust them in their teenage years. But there's a lot that can go wrong very sideways.
Right.
If it's at your house, it's good. So I've told him that. It's funny hearing you say
Yeah.
the same thing.
Interesting. So you had said in the early years that you had up to 3 jobs and then finally back down to 1, but crazy hours. Is there a different, I would say that is providing for your family. Is there a different way that you would look for providing your family away from work, or how do you look at providing your family?
I think providing for your family is a huge responsibility. And again, it's how it's passed down, right? My father instilled very strongly that you have a strong work ethic and you are the man, your responsibility to make sure your family's taken care of. That has kind of changed in more of the recent generations of time.
Yeah.
And people say back, well, you want to have a house, got to have 2 people working. And people were saying that even when I was young. But you sit there and you look at that and kind of go, what do you really want for your children? Right? That's really the long-term process there. And for me, I remember very strongly, we had a lot of kids that were at our house when I was growing up. My mom watched all the kids in the neighborhood, right? Everybody would be at our house. The downside of that is these kids would come home from school, tell my mom the excitement of what happened in the day, and then by the time their parents came to pick them up, they didn't even think about it. And so my mom got all the goodness of what took place at school that the parents never got to receive because they weren't involved. My wife got all those things. I got some of them, and most of them were secondhand from her. Of, ooh, this happened at school today. How cool was that? And I'd be like, yeah, hey, that was great. I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed. But the providing piece, to me, it really doesn't matter how you well, I shouldn't. That's not true. It doesn't matter how you provide. You want to do it legally. But I mean, a job is a job, right? None of us go to work because, oh, I'm so excited to go. I don't care if they pay me today. I love my job. It's not
Right.
true, right? They
Yeah.
wouldn't call it a job if that's what it was.
Yeah.
But it's what's the best way to provide for your family without taking the least amount of time away from your family. And again, that's a double-edged sword,
Yeah.
right? Because it's to make enough, you got to do enough in the company to grow a little bit to make enough money so that you're comfortable.
Yep.
And then being wise enough to say, this is comfortable. I don't need to be rich.
Wow. Yeah.
You mentioned at one point that you went through life with some ups and downs in terms of being a father and husband, and we've heard how busy you were to provide for your family. Is there any lessons that you had to learn the hard way through being a father that you could pass down?
I think not being fully connected. There are times where my kids were doing things that weren't the best things they could have been doing for themselves, and I wasn't there enough to realize it until I was farther down the road. We went through a phase at our house. Again, we invited everybody to our house all the time. We went through a phase where someone was stealing from us, from our bedroom. And so I thought it was one of my kids, and my kid immediately pointed to one of their friends and said, oh no, it's this person. I said, well, then stop letting that person come to our house. Years and years later, it was one of my kids that was taking things because they wanted more than what they had, or their friends had things that they didn't have. We joke all the time with our with our children that, you guys were actually pretty poor. You just didn't realize you were poor because we made a big deal out of the little things that we had. But I mean, you see that kid at school has got the brand new shoes or the brand new this every month or every 2 months or whatever. That wasn't my kids. My kids, man, you wore them until they were wore out, right? And if we had money, we bought a new pair, right? Or we went to a secondhand store and got a new pair. But it was just, we scraped and we learned to scrape for many years. But again, I think that's part of the process of really learning, being appreciative for what you have. And again, it's attitude, right? Your attitude makes all the difference in the world. That we can say this is the most exciting thing in the world. Hey, here's your new Kmart shoes or Walmart shoes, versus somebody else is getting brand new Nikes.
Yeah.
This is how you present it.
That's awesome.
I don't know that I answered that question though.
I think that hits. Yeah, I really do. I think that correlates very well to an advice for a dad to be connected with his kids because of the importance.
Yeah. I was just thinking if I wanted to say that I relate to that too, because we grew up pretty broke. And my mom, one thing that she let us do is be bored. And I love my childhood. Like I think we knew that we were not well off because obviously we were in a nicer neighborhood because my grandparents had helped us with our house. So we saw what other kids had and we wanted it, but we were also allowed to use our imagination, and that's how we had our fun. Because my mom, we didn't have, we had electronics every now and then, but she allowed us to be fun and go use our imagination outside. And so, yeah, I like that.
We saw how busy you were raising kids, working jobs. You got to retire, and now you're enjoying retirement. What do you do for fun these days then?
So I got again. My favorite activity: floating the Spokane River.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it's hard for 6 months out of the year. It's actually hard for about 9 months out of the year.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's probably my favorite activity. Learned it about 3 years ago when we moved up here in 2019. Like I said, I retired in June of 2019. And then we go into beautiful COVID. Yay, what a fun season that was. Coming out of COVID, though, we have a friend who lives in the rivers like, hey, you got to come float. I'm like, sounds like a boring activity. And so he's the one who kind of got me into the floating. And by the time that season was over, we had bought tubes for our whole family. Like, hey, you guys all got to go do this with us. We've had friends that come up to visit, like, oh, you got to go float. Some of the best time. And again, young families, I'm sorry, it's hard to do for you. But I would tell you, for me, to sit back and kind of go, hey, throw the tube in the water and then you float for the next 4 or 5 hours and you just go down at your own pace. The sun's beating on you. Got cool water if you get too hot. My wife and I did one midweek, and midweek was the best way to go because we're retired. We saw, I don't know, a family of 6 deer. We saw a fox. We saw all these animals, wildlife, just as we're floating by because we're the only ones in the river. We're not making noise, and we're just going down. And these animals are it's like, this is incredible. And just the beauty that's around you, just that is my all-time favorite activity. That's my fun. If I can do it, I would do it every day. I also enjoy golfing. And I enjoy, I got to be careful because my wife will take this the wrong way, but I do enjoy watching our grandsons. I didn't get to be as much involved in my older grandkids. And so I don't have the same relationship that I do with with our 2 youngest grandsons, but I get to see them 2 to 3 times a week. They're at the house. We have fun together. We've gone through seasons together, and it's been a lot of fun for me. And I wish I would have had that more with my other 5 grandkids. But just the opportunity to spend with them is just incredible. And thinking about legacy and being able to pass things on, that's been huge to me as it's helping me to remember more things to make sure I share with my kids as I'm going on. Like, hey, I remember doing this as I was a kid. Never thought about it until this experience.
Your wife's going to text now saying you're watching your grandkids 5 days of the week now.
I know. That'll be bad.
Because your wife likes watching the grandkids too, doesn't she?
She is the number one reason we watch the grandkids.
Yeah.
Honestly, most of my kids would say, no, you ain't watching my kids. I was the grumpy grandpa for the longest time. And then I slowly softened up. And it's been incredible, the process of being able to nurture and care for and have an effect on this generation.
Yeah, definitely.
Just
we need older wisdom and older advice. for this generation for sure.
Just out of curiosity, how, because we haven't had anybody in this shoe yet, how has that impacted your relationship with your kids then?
I think it's been a lot because I've actually had to come to them to kind of go, hey, I need to ask for forgiveness for things that I screwed up on as your dad, as an adult when you were younger, looking for things. I think it's helped change. It's also through my in-law, my daughters-in-law, my son-in-law, for them to sit back and kind of go, what's going on with this? It's fun to go and have them talk to us about, hey, what about this or what about that? But then for a couple of them to have the boldness to be able to challenge me in some of my areas of where I'm not as good, to say, hey, you need to make a change in this area. You're kind of like, I don't want to receive that advice from you. I'm 60. Who are you? But the reality is that's really helped me learn and grow and help continue to change. One of the things that we teach in marriage when we teach our classes and stuff is we talk about to be a student of your spouse forever, right? Because your spouse is constantly changing. If I'm not willing to change, I'm just going to get crusty and old and discarded. Right? I've got to change, and I've got to learn how to be more flexible and more loose with my schedule and more uplifting and positive with some of the things that when my dad starts to come out of my mouth, right? I can't let that happen because that's a generational thing. It's one of the things to me that I want to, I guess, encourage other dads as we're kind of going through this is the generational sin. My dad was a yeller. I was a yeller. I was most of my kids' life. And unfortunately, my oldest son is a yeller. I have changed that, but not before I broke the generational. I already passed it on to my son.
Yeah.
So trying to help him understand. And one of the blessings to me in that process was everybody's at the house. Our house is not that big. Kids were being kids and just running, which drives me bananas in our house. And the kids are just running, being loud. Stuff's just crashing in the playroom. And my kids are all there. I got up and I walked into the playroom. And I said, hey, can you guys just calm down? And I walked back and sat down. And my son says, how did you do that? I was like, wow, hey, I've changed.
That's cool.
Right? And so that was one of the things to me was really kind of cool. What a blessing to sit back and kind of go, hey, I have made that adjustment. I didn't go in there and just go, roar.
Yeah.
And it was really kind of cool.
That's awesome. And your son gets to see that too. So even though you didn't break the generational chain, you're still showing him what it's like to try and grow and change.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yep.
That's really cool.
So you brought up your grandkids a few times. How many grandkids do you have? And are they all kind of local around you, or go into a little bit about your grandkids?
So we actually have 7 grandkids. Kind of a cool little story, which helps, again, as I'm getting older, helps me with some of the age stuff. On my wife's 50th birthday, my oldest son gave my wife a onesie for her birthday that, hey, you're going to be a grandma.
Wow.
Which was really kind of cool. For my 50th birthday, my wife's a year and a half older than I am. For my 50th birthday, my second grandson, or my first grandson, my second grandchild was born. And so I was like, okay, they're both at our 50s, so we can keep track of their ages, which makes it easier.
There you go.
So one will be 12 this year, one will be 11 this year, and then I'm going to butcher it. And I want to say we're like 10 or no, 12, 11, probably 8, 6, 4, 3, 2.
Wow.
Something like that amongst all of them. My one son's got 4 girls. So yeah, there you go. And then my one son's got just the one grandson, and then my daughter's got two boys. And just again, short story for me is my oldest son family moved up to the northern Idaho area in 2018, I believe. And then my kids all started talking about, hey, we're all moving out of the state that we were living in. And so my daughter's like, well, I'm not going to be the only one stuck here. So she moved up to the Seattle area. And my other son moved up to almost, well, he was Western Washington, but like almost like Bellingham area. And so we're the only one in the state. All our kids are gone. We're like, this just stinks. So that helped drive the whole. We were going to retire in a nice warm state. And then we came to Idaho. But after we got up here, my wife was praying very hard that my one son would move over. And so in the last year now, all 3 of my kids live, and 7 grandkids live within a 6-mile radius of our house.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That's cool.
So everybody's close. Some of them will probably say too close. Everybody is close. And it's a real blessing to kind of go, hey, something comes up, man, you're there, you know?
Yeah.
And again, we have 24 hours a day. We're available.
Right.
So it makes it that much easier.
That's so cool.
Which of your oldest, youngest, middle had the 12-year-old?
My oldest has the 12-year-old.
And then who has the 2-year-old?
My daughter, which is the youngest.
So all of your kids waited until late 20s, early 30s to have kids then, mathematically, right? You said that they're between 35.
My daughter did. My daughter waited. I mean, she didn't really intentionally wait. God kind of kept her to keep maturing to get to the place. So she was ready. For her to start her family, she wanted to start a family much earlier than that. And so it was a lot of frustration for her. But my oldest had been in with his wife for a while before they started. My second son, they were pregnant pretty quick after they got married, but they got married later. They didn't get married in their early 20s. They were more in their later 20s when they got married. So
Nobody followed in your guys' footsteps then.
nope.
Wow.
They're all wiser, so they could be a little bit more mature.
That's funny.
Were you the parents that were like, okay, it's time for grandkids, time for grandkids?
Nope.
You guys are,
Nope.
you waited for their time.
I mean, my wife wanted grandkids bad.
Yeah.
But we never tried to pressure the kids.
Right.
Like, when you're ready, you're going to do it.
Yep.
And again, it's the in-laws that marry in that partially control how much excess you get towards your kids, right? That's maybe the wrong way to say it. It's the women involved that more drive it, right? And so I mean, because of our daughter, we see her boys all the time, and she's always said, if you guys move, we're moving too. Versus my boys, they're established, they have their lives, their things that are going on. It's like, if you move, hey, see ya.
One thing as a new father that I like to ask is, what is something that I can look forward to that is a low cost or free activity that you like to do with your kids?
Or your wife, if you weren't.
True. Yeah.
So let's start with the wife.
Okay.
So again, we met in high school. We were two broke teenagers in the beginning process. So we did a lot of park dates, totally free. I mean, you just got to get gas to get there.
Yeah.
And we would go and swing on the swings. And it was just something that was simple. It was great conversations. You think about in those dating stages, you do a lot of talking, which is great to be able to, let's go to the swings and talk. The park that we went to had an amphitheater. And so we were able to just kind of mosey around the park, swing a little bit, talk. That was a great free date. I believe very strongly in free dates. We don't have many free dates these days, but you sit back and kind of look at that and think, that's to me, one of the most important things, especially newly married, kind of getting started, especially even with young family, of kind of what can I do to help go do things that are away from your house.
Yep.
I'm a big fan of get out of your house to go do things, because when you're home is more of a work environment, whether you work at home or you're a stay-at-home mom or you're a stay-at-home dad or whatever you are, that's a work environment. It's like, get out of that environment to go somewhere else so you're both free from the distractions of the house. I believe that strongly. Again, for me, for free stuff, again, we had a house that had a pool. We played pool games and made up pool games and did stupid things in the pool. And it was just all fun, right? And so it was totally free. Again, bring your friends over. Doesn't matter. That's good. We're all having fun doing things. But that was a lot of stuff. We would do a lot of outdoor activities, park related or pool. The expense of buying the ping pong table, a couple $100. I don't know what it is nowadays, but a couple $100. Boy, you beat the crap out of that poor thing.
Yeah.
It was fun, and we did all kinds of stupid things. And that's, to me, is the getting outside of the box, right? Don't get stuck in, I got to do it this way, right?
Yeah.
Get out and go try something new. One of the things I took from my dad is, my dad was a big thinker, and he was a strategy person, and he would kind of do all these, I don't want to say mind games, but games where you were using your imagination. You're thinking about all these different things. And so you could just sit in a room and you could play a game, and it's like, okay, we're all having fun. Doesn't cost nothing.
Yeah.
Game that comes to mind as we're talking about, we used to play Go to the Head of the Class. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that before. When you were, we do this thing, and we did it at our house. We had beanbag chairs. Sorry, we take cushions off the couches. We'd lay them all up and put them all around the room and say, okay, everybody starts at one spot. If you answer the question right, you get to go to the next thing. And so we just do schoolwork like that with the kids.
That's fun.
You're not as good in math, I'd ask you a math question. You're not as good in English, I'd ask you an English question. We just do these different things, and it was really kind of cool to see the kids are progressing around the room, and then they're getting competition, right?
Yeah.
We could have didn't matter if they brought friends over, didn't matter. Totally free, and you're just trying to challenge them in things to keep them thinking. I believe very strongly that we have to keep our mind fully engaged to be able to continue to learn and grow.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to be a mush when I sit down, in, I don't know, hopefully another 30 years, and I'm sitting in a chair and I'm just drooling on myself and I have no brainwave going on.
Yeah.
I want to continue to be thinking about things and challenging things and kind of like, you sit there and kind of go, hey, let's talk about math. I love math. Boom, boom, boom. Let's go through these numbers. Great. You're not strong at it. I'll help you get stronger because we'll just keep drilling those numbers.
Yeah.
We can make it fun.
The one thing that we play we call it wavelength, where we try to say a random word, and then with that word we try to correlate it together to get to the same word. And so we'll play that kind of an intro to warm up on the mics for the intro, and then we play with our wives. I think of a word, and then they have to say
Corresponding words.
just a different word. So if I'm thinking like movie theater, but they're saying like airplane, you scale that on a 1 to 100 scale. So airplane and movie theater is like, that's like a 1. That's like not even close. So that's kind of cool little games that you can play for free.
Yep.
That just cost knowledge,
Right.
brain power.
You made it pretty apparent how important you think free dates are with your wife. So you think dating in general is really important with your wife, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
So just out of curiosity, then tying it into fatherhood, how did you and your wife handle that with 3 little kids, making dating a priority?
It wasn't a priority for us back then, which is a shame to say. I'm sorry to say that. We basically scrimped to get by. My wife's parents were local most of the years, and so they were more than happy to help with childcare. And it's just a matter of, as you're kind of growing through all the different seasons of what's going on, to kind of go, how are we doing? But we weren't real good about dating back then. We would still, our big thing was we'd celebrate an anniversary every year. We may not have money for anything else, but we would celebrate an anniversary somehow, some way, because our marriage was that important to us. It was once we got a little farther down the road and kind of sit back and go, dating is so important. We need to make sure we are dating and then encouraging others to date. And I think it's a typical man thing, right? I've conquered the woman. I've married her. Yay, she's mine. I don't need to do anything else ever again. And that's the worst thing, because then you're going down signing papers one day that says you're done. The idea is to make sure that you're constantly, hey, what am I doing to demonstrate that I love you, that I'm doing things? So picking flowers. I was really good at stealing flowers from our neighbors to kind of go, hey, I brought you some flowers today. They didn't cost me anything, right?
That's awesome.
And
Those dang deer.
one of the funny things is she got mad at me at one point. She says, you got to quit spending money on flowers, because I would go and buy flowers.
Yeah.
You're wasting. We don't have money to waste on flowers. Oh, okay. You want flowers? Yeah, I want flowers. Just don't buy them. Oh, she didn't encourage me to,
Go pick.
acquire flowers from our neighbors. But it's something that's simple. It's easy.
Yeah.
Right. You go by a field. Hey, there's flowers out there. Stop. Rips them out, cut them up a little bit, bring them home. Hey, I got you some flowers. Doesn't say I bought them. I got them for you.
Yeah.
Right? Doesn't say there's still dirt hanging off these. Hey, I brought you some flowers from the neighbor. They're really pretty, aren't they?
Ripped them out of the ground myself.
Now, don't do that with roses, because those, that hurt.
Yeah.
Is there anything then, because dating, you guys didn't make enough of a priority, but you made it to retirement age and you're still married. You're almost 40 years married, so that's an accomplishment. So you still had to do things to invest in your marriage with your wife. What did that look like when you guys were too busy for dating?
So we were very involved with church, with the kids being, I don't know, middle school and up. And so we were in groups together. We were teaching a class together. I think one of the best things Denise and I ever did for our marriage is when we started to teach marriage class. And we've matured enough in our time together to sit back and tell people, hey, we teach for us selfishly. We don't teach for you. I mean, that's not true because we want to help other people learn and grow. But as we go through the material, it challenges us to like, hey, what about this? Ooh, I let that slip. Whatever's kind of going on. Um, and I mean, Logan's been through one of the classes. I'm pretty vulnerable. I kind of go, hey, these are all areas I screwed up on in my life. Don't do the same stupid things that I did. Because to me, it's important, right? We need to learn from each other instead of waiting until we're in the bottom of a hole to kind of go, how did I get in here?
Yeah.
And so that's what we do. We push dating very hard. We make a very important push to date for us still today, weekly. Um, and again, we sit back and kind of go, we're retired. There's no reason we can't date every day if we wanted to. Yeah, but I can't afford to date every single day. And then you run out of places to go. And it's like, is it really a date? I read a book way back when called The 10 Great Dates by the ARPs. ARP is the couple. And they wrote this book and they refer to going to the dentist office as a date. And you're like, how is that a date? I mean, that's a dentist office. Sorry, dentists, if you're out there listening. But you sit back and kind of go, anything you do together, the two of you going somewhere, you're in the car together, driving, you can be talking. It's a great date. And so it just depends on what you invest in. What are you bringing to it? You're bringing an attitude from the frustration of the day. Doesn't make a great day. I'm kind of going, hey, I want to spend time with the person that I love. It can be a great date.
So one thing that we were just talking about the other day, we went and got dinner. They got rid of their kids for the evening, and how close our us couples are to each other. Whenever you say that, we're not.
I know where you're going now, but
right.
it's funny how you.
So, one thing a few nights ago, we went out and got dinner. They got rid of their kids, and we were just talking about how we kind of count that, even though him and his wife and mine and my wife are together, we're still counting that kind of as a date night with each other because we're close friends, and they got rid of their kids and stuff. So, would you ever consider that kind of with your friends if you went out on a double date? I guess that's kind of a thing, being a double date. But that's still, we're full of conversation. We try not to be on our phones as much. So what would you say about kind of like double dating and stuff?
I think it's seasons of life too.
Yeah.
Right. There's a very different season where you want connection with your friends because I mean, your wife is with your daughters all day. She needs adult interaction.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. And so it's like, I don't care who it is that the adult's talking to me. I'll go to a lecture and they're talking to me. Hey, I get adult interaction. And that's one of the big things is again, it's a season of life where you're in, right? I don't consider for us where we're at today, if we go on a double date, we don't count that as a date.
Yeah.
Because we're sharing with other people.
Right.
Right. I'm very social. My wife is not as social as I am. And so I can dominate a conversation and talk to you and your wife, and my wife is there and she's not saying a whole lot. And she's like, that wasn't a date. You didn't even talk to me. You didn't even look at me. You didn't know I was there.
Yeah.
Right. One of the things I get in trouble for often is I get caught up in something and then I don't invite her in enough.
Yep.
Right. Because she's more of an introvert. It's like, no, come on. Another thing you guys will probably not relate to. There was an old commercial way back when E.F. Hutton speaks, everyone listens. It was an old financial planner kind of advice. And I sit back and I go, my wife is E.F. Hutton because when she speaks, she's got pearls of wisdom that she's sharing.
Yeah.
And she needs to share it more often. But being an introvert, she's got to feel like she's in the right environment. She's safe. She's comfortable, confident enough to be able to share.
Yeah.
But when she shares, watch out.
Yeah.
So season of life, right? I mean, as you're younger, the time together that the four of you are having conversations, if you're hopefully you're driving separate cars, because then you're still having conversations on the way there and on the way back.
Yeah.
But even if you go to a event or whatever together, it's still conversation that you're having together. But as you're starting to get older, you should have the availability for more of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you want to try to make sure you're having them one-on-one with your spouse versus sharing that time.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a big portion of why we get stuck in this is because of not only time limitations, but income limitations for if we're going to go out to dinner. We're going to go out to dinner with them. Okay, that's great, but that doesn't necessarily mean... And so my wife and I are awful at free dates. We're like, if we're going on a date, we're spending money, and that's a horrible mindset to get it. But it's just how we are. We're both spenders. And when we're on the date with them, it's fun. And then we're like, okay, but we might limit another date this week because of financial
Right, yeah.
reasons.
That's why I like the what is a free activity
Yeah.
or date that you do, because this economy's kind of rough, you know.
Floating
with,
is free. Floating
yeah.
is free.
Which it's funny, we do that with them as well in the summer, and
Yeah.
we haven't really ventured doing that alone because we're young, we like being social.
Exactly.
So,
Well,
but
and
floating
your
is
wife's
awesome.
need, right? I mean, your wife maybe not there yet, but pretty soon she's going to need more adult interaction
Yeah.
besides just the blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah.
Wah,
What was
wah.
that? That was milk.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right. Yeah. So you kind of already got into it, but how did you end up prioritizing your family over your work?
I think it took a long time to get there. And I think and to me, I didn't do it right. Okay. I don't think that really happened until my oldest was a teenager and we were into all of the power struggles and different things that were going on, sitting back kind of going, I need to be a better example. I need to be home more. I need to be in these things. And so it was a real transition for me, but a transition for us as a family too, to sit back and kind of go, hey, I'm not trying to do all the overtime. I'm not trying to get any extra hours so I can be home. Um, I was able to be in a position where I could go to most of my son's basketball games when he was playing freshman basketball, which was really kind of cool. But it was neat to be able to be there and observe what was going on and then try to be a positive influence instead of my dad in that situation. Um, and so I think that was part of my transition to sit back and go, I'm going to be more involved with what's going on and let work be work
Mm-hmm.
instead of letting work be life.
Yeah.
I think typical man, you are taught, you are raised that you are created to work and provide for your family, whatever that costs. And sometimes that really gets out of whack and people go the wrong direction. I got kind of career focused when my kids were uh, late in high school, feeling like they didn't need as much of me. And all of a sudden I got a little more career focused and driven to try to do more things, which started to draw me away from the family. And then my wife was really good about kind of going, hey, bring it back, buddy. Right. Just had that conversation just yesterday, kind of talking about when was I really distracted by work. And again, I think it's innate in all men to sit back and kind of go, hey, you want to succeed and be successful at work. That's great when your old graves, what's your tombstone going to say? Hey, he was a great provider. The work loved him.
Right.
We didn't know him. I don't want that on my tombstone.
Yep.
Right? You always want to say that he was a great husband and father. Right? You don't have to say I was a provider. Right?
Yeah.
Obviously, I sucked at that for a long time at the beginning, but it's just really sitting back and going, what do you want in life? What are your priorities in life? And once you put your family as the number one priority, it changes things.
Yeah. Wow.
Was your wife vocal about the fact that she got to those power struggles with your oldest son? Like, did you know from her it was happening, or did you just eventually start witnessing it?
Never witnessed it. My son would never challenge in front of me. Right? I was the disciplinarian of the house. My wife is peace at all cost. And so I'm working day shift, and kind of one of the funny things and turning points in our family life, I guess. I'm working day shift. My son is disrespecting my wife, challenging like, no, I'm not going to do that. Whatever. He's taller than she is at this point, and she would call me and say, you need to do something with your son. And so I came home that day and said, hey, this is what we're going to start doing. Instead of mom getting upset with what's going on, she's going to start counting. And every number she counts to is a spanking I'm going to give you. Now, he's a teenager. Okay. So this, and again, you may have to censor this part. I was a belt person with him, right? All three of my children understood what the belt was.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got to the point where he would call me on the phone and say, Dad, you owe me 3 spankings when you get home.
Wow.
Okay. So what that was is my wife would go, that's 1. And he would still keep pushing. Hey, that's 2. Right. And then she'd go 3. And he's like, holy crap, that's 3 spankings when Dad gets home. Now, the hard part for me is then I get home, no clue what's going on. Right.
Yep.
No
Everybody's
context.
upset. He's in his room waiting for me to come spank him. And I'm like, why am I spanking you? right? Oh, you disrespected your mom. That's not okay.
Yeah.
We went through this process, and I'll never forget this day. We're standing in the hallway, and he goes, "But Dad, we're buds." And I said, "Listen, your mom is one. The rest of you kids come after mom." And I crushed him.
Hmm.
Right? I didn't spank him. I did nothing. I just told him those words that, yeah, we're friends, but she is my number one.
Hmm.
And he was crushed by that. And it took a long time to rebuild the relationship because he always thought like I'm number one, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, it was the high point is he would call me and say, "Hey, you owe me two."
Hmm.
Like, all right, be ready when I get home.
Yeah.
So that, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So that is really cool how you got to that level once he was to the teenage years. You guys went through the younger ages. Was there any disagreements that you and your wife had in those younger years until you guys got a good system going? And how did you guys handle disagreements if you had any?
So ours were, if we had any.
I can't
Only
assume.
if.
I can't-
Wow. So one of the things that I find very comical is my daughter, and I don't know if my boys have ever told us, but my daughter said, "Mom and Dad, you guys never fought." And I thought, "Oh yeah, we did, but we just did it in our bedroom."
Mm-hmm.
And so when we were in disagreement, whether it was parenting, whether it was our marriage, whether it was finances, whether it was whatever, we would go in our room and we would have this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And our room, I don't think was soundproof, but it must have been for the kids because they never heard it. But there was a lot of heated fellowship, is the word I like to use. Heated fellowship that took place in our room of both opinions. Again, my wife is a total introvert, right? So to get her to be willing to share and what's her feeling and what's her emotion until she was mad, I had to pull it out of her. When she's mad, it flowed freely, right? But to get her to that point, so again, we did a lot of. Again, I was the disciplinarian. I was raised with the belts. I understood the belts. I never wanted to use the belt, but it just like, hey, if I will get your attention, right? Kind of getting off topic a little bit. Discipline. My number two, you put him in the room on timeout, he couldn't handle it. Which is like, hey, this is great. We don't have to even touch you. We just go in your room and sit there and you're on timeout for by yourself. What? I got to sit by myself? Yeah.
Huh.
Okay. Right. Other kid like, hey, this is great. You punish me all day. I love being in my room by myself. So I mean, as every kid is a little different. It's the uniqueness of how you discipline, but the importance of being, I don't want to say like-minded, but one united in your parenting, because then the kids can't play you against each other.
Yeah.
Right. And that's always the challenge, kind of going, well, I'll ask mom, and mom would say, okay, let's go ask your dad.
Mm.
Well, can't you make that decision? I can, but your dad and I will be united. Oh crap.
Yeah.
Right.
I know what Dad's gonna say.
And
He
so
already said no.
and so it's just that process of sitting back kind of going, we'll make these decisions together. Not that my decision is right, her decision is wrong, her decision is right, my decision is wrong. It's making sure we're on the same page to say, this is what we think is okay.
So you said the awesome term heated fellowship with your wife. How did you guys get through that when you got through differences with your wife?
Again, this is a learned process, a learned technique on going through it. It took me a long time to learn it, right? I mean, I would tell you for my marriage, our first 9 years, I think our typical marriage, we were rocky. I use this illustration all the time that couples do this all the time, right? I mean, you got the highs and the lows of a marriage, right? We're more like this today, but we still have our downturns, but we recognize them faster, right? So we're able to come back from them faster. The biggest advice that I could share in this area is to sit back and kind of go, if you can learn to listen and learn from your spouse, you can be a wise person, right? So I mean, I again love Psalms and Proverbs and all the scripture that is there, and they sit there and talk about a wise man and a foolish man, right? Right? You sit back and kind of go, God gifted you with this beautiful woman, right? That has all kinds of information, knowledge that's totally different than how you think. A foolish man doesn't listen to that. A wise man says, I want to understand and learn from this so that when we make a decision, we are making a united decision on what we want to do. Most disagreements that take place in a relationship are because we don't truly understand what our spouse is saying. Part of that is my man-filtered ears, right? Because I only hear certain ways and I need to rehear things a couple times to kind of go, oh, I understand what you're saying. But part of that also is how do we communicate, right? To me, what happens up here versus what comes out my mouth, it's not always the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. I always love hearing our pastor at church when he talks about the idea sounds great up here. And then I speak the words and go, that was really stupid. I think that happens a lot in our relationships with people too, right? They sound great in our mind, but then we start speaking and go, ooh, that wasn't so good. Or we don't listen to ourselves and we kind of go, why don't you understand me?
Yeah.
That was perfectly clear up here.
Right.
And so really taking the time to understand your spouse is probably one of the best things you can do for your marriage, to be able to sit down and kind of go, I don't understand why you are thinking that. And then validating. So I hear you saying whatever it is you're saying. I hear that. Again, I don't have to agree with it, but I want to hear it so I understand why this is important. And then again, that helps you make decisions. So you sit back and kind of go, again, a foolish man doesn't take wise counsel. He makes his own decisions. A wise man is looking for wise counsel, and your wife, your spouse, is probably one of the wisest people you know, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. One of the wisest people you know, because they know you better than most people.
Yeah.
To be able to help you make that smart decision.
I think that's really encouraging too, because the Bible talks a lot about wise and foolish, and it kind of gives like black and white definitions. But you said the term, you can learn to be wise. And I think that's really encouraging, because I can read it and I'm like, well, I'm definitely not wise according to what the Bible's saying. I'm definitely a fool right now. I want to be wise. But there's not like that you can learn in the Bible in particular. And the way you elaborated on that was encouraging for sure, to focus on learning to be wise, even if you're not right now.
Cool.
So I really like that. Just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
You said very early on that you were a yeller. How did you end up learning to manage anger at home?
I didn't for a long time. The excuse was I worked a lot of hours. I wasn't home a lot. I didn't get a lot of sleep. So don't poke the bear. Right. And I think that was just the excuse that my wife kind of created so that the kids would not hate me. But I was explosive. I was, my way is the right way, right? Everyone in the world should follow Matt's way, and the world will be a perfect place. And we'd all drive off the cliff together. And so I think it was just a learning process of kind of hearing myself, seeing the damage I would do to my kids, right? It's the impact that you can make on their lives, good and bad, right? I mean, I sit back and say very strongly, we are an example 24/7. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad.
Yeah.
No matter what we say, what we do, we are setting an example. And especially as kids are little, they're soaking in everything. They kind of go, oh, this is what it means to be good. This is what it means to be bad. And so really understanding, reading the room, reading their faces to kind of like, oh boy, that was really bad. Trying to change who I was so I could be a better parent, right? I don't think anybody ever gets into the game kind of going, hey, I'm going to have kids so I can just crush these people's lives, right? I want to squash these lives, and so they're all just depressed and they're on Oprah one day complaining about my parents or Dr. Phil or whatever. That's not realistic, yet we sit back and kind of go, if I'm not willing to change, this is what potentially can happen. And so that was for me. I had to learn to curtail what am I angry about? What's really going on? Is it the kid's fault? Is it my fault? Is it my wife's fault? How are we dealing with whatever is going on? And then for Denise, obviously my wife, to help me soften who I was, not be weaker, but to like bring it more gently, right?
Have humility, maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you can correct softly. You don't have to bring the heavy hand every time, all the time. One of my favorite stories of all time, my daughter was doing some crazy stuff out there a little bit, and she was really frustrating. She's somewhere in her teen years. And I remember I grabbed her face, held the two sides of her face, and said, look at me. And she got so mad. And I'm like, but you're not listening to what I'm saying. And again, she's a teenage girl, so she's like, she knows everything. Why do I need to listen to my father? And it's so funny that we have the conversation still today about that experience that happened, 20 years ago. And sit back kind of going, what the heck? Why did you do that? And I'm like, because you needed to listen to me. And I sit back and kind of go, the hard part for me in my And my Christian walk in the process, as I sit back and I look oftentimes as God the Father, I'm the child, right? And I kind of go, how foolish am I not to listen to my Father? And yet I do the very same thing to others to say, I am all wise. You should listen to me. It's I need to seek Him and get guidance from Him on how to do, and look at that versus kind of going, who am I to try? I'm going to go wipe out these people. You know,
Hmm.
it's done. So anger is a challenge. It was hard for me. I was raised with anger, and again, I passed the generational sin on. I don't think any of my kids spank like I spanked my kids. Yet I know that two of them have the hot blood that can boil
Hmm.
Yeah.
in their bodies, and it's still, how do we break that so that it doesn't pass on another generation?
Wow.
I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was really cool.
Can I add um, one thing that annoys me, and one thing that annoys me in like my anger field is bad drivers. That always gets to me. And one specific example is I was walking downtown with one of my buddies, and we were just walking by the condos downtown, and a Mercedes had pulled in, but we're walking on the sidewalk there, right by the driveway. And she, like, we were getting ready to cross that driveway entranceway, and she just drove right past us. And I'm like, what the heck? Why would she do that? I don't cuss or use any vulgar language, but I just was like upset about that. And I was just like, she thinks she's better than everyone else because she's driving a Mercedes. And my buddy's like, and I was like, why does that annoy me? Like, I said that to him, and he's like, I think it's like he wasn't trying to offend me or whatever, but he was being real, just saying that it's a pride thing, that I think I'm better in that situation than her, that as a pedestrian or as Caleb, she should have let me go. And instead of, even if she just it didn't see us or thought she was better, as a believer, as a Christian, we should have humility that stuff shouldn't really get to us. And same with like bad drivers, if they cut us off, we shouldn't. It's so hard to not react that way, but to just have to be humble in Christ and to be more Christ-like, to let them merge or to let them go before us. That was a few years ago, and that still kind of stuck with me. Obviously, I'm still not perfect, but it's I definitely like that, thinking of having a more humble mindset, and I think that can kind of translate towards anger at your kids as well. I haven't really experienced anger towards kids, but
it'll come.
yeah, I've experienced annoyance. I will say the crying for no reason, but
But there is a reason. You just don't understand it.
right, yes,
So the
we're
one thing to
finding
me
that.
that someone taught me way back when that has really helped me in the process, as you were sharing that, just made me think about it, is why would I give my power to someone else?
Mm.
So you think about that lady who's driving in front of you. If you get angry, you're giving that to this person.
Yeah,
You're like, I'm giving. I am weak. You're better than me, obviously, because you just drove right past me and didn't care, and I care about something that I wasn't hit, I wasn't whatever, and so I give this to you. Right? Someone cuts you off. Rawr, here comes the bear.
mm-hmm.
Why?
Yeah,
Why do I want to give that person I don't even know my power? Right? Because when you lose control, the other person is in control.
yeah,
Right? I'm giving that away. Why do I want to give that away? Right? I want to keep my composure so I can control what I'm doing as
mm-hmm.
best that I can. And then also in the same, from a Christian standpoint, allow the Spirit to work through me versus letting the evil Matt work through me,
Yeah.
right? And let it all go out.
I think that's also part of a generational sin. Is my dad kind of reacts that way, and I would see that just growing up, and so me and my brother kind of have that annoyance toward drivers. So
I think a lot of people do.
yeah, especially with the rate of our city growing, that it grows, and the people that come up here. But again, I'm not any better than them. So
You got into it a little bit when you were sharing about how you had a grandkid situation. The kids were making noise in the house. You walked in and said, "Can you guys settle down?" Your son even asked, "How did you do that?" So you've expressed how you were a yeller and you've yelled and handled that with your kids. And then now into grandkids, you're not a yeller. what's a piece of advice you would hand down on handling people who are yellers when it comes to yelling at their kids? I've noticed I'm a yeller, so like, what would you tell me to help me with that?
I think the pearl of wisdom here, okay, is to breathe through whatever's going on and realize what you do is going to affect generations, not your children, but generations to come.
Well,
So something happens, and you kind of go, "I'm going to handle this as godly as possibly as I can, and encourage them through love through whatever needs to take place, versus let the worldly sin bear for me. Here it comes, and I'm going to damage you for years to come." And it's you and your kids and maybe their kids
Mm.
to sit back and kind of go, right? Your oldest is six, four, sorry, four,
yeah.
and to sit back and kind of go, I can damage someone at four by how I approach this situation,
Hmm.
and think I can scar this child that will then scar their child, that will then scar their child, that will then scar the next round. And the hardest way to really look at that is in my wife's family, there was molestation that took place in the family that has gone on generationally.
Hmm.
And it's like, I don't think anybody sits back and says, "Ooh, I'm going to go mess with this child."
Hmm.
I think it just, that's what they know, and so they do it, right? Yelling, right? I explode. My kid kind of goes, "Oh, this is what you're supposed to do when you're upset. You explode." "Oh, I will just explode at someone." And then the generations that it can affect is incredible. And that's the part to me to sit back and go, how can I control me? And again, having the head knowledge to say, how do I do this? And then having the support for for like your wife to say, even she just says, "Hey, generations." Whatever I mean, I'm a big fan of code words in family, right?
Mm-hmm.
Generations, Logan, generations. And you're like, "Oh, okay, you know what? I'll be back in 1 minute." I need to go gather myself, and I'm coming back so I can address this, so I can show generational love for years to come, instead of saying I'm the one that crushed, emotionally crushed, right? I mean, you just think about the impact that you have is incredible. Especially, I want to say that the younger your children are, the wiser they are, and we all lose knowledge every day of the rest of our lives,
Hmm.
which makes no sense. But you sit back and say, a baby can cry, and you react. When your baby cries, now you're like going, "Go get it yourself," right? I'm sitting back like, "Hey, somebody else go take care of that kid," right? But the baby says something and goes, "Hey,
I'm hungry.
I need something.
Yeah.
My diaper's full of stuff. Somebody
Mhm.
needs to come take care of this." And they cry, and it happens. They don't say anything, right?
Yep.
And the amazing thing to me is a parent that's really in tune with their kid. They notice those difference in cries. I never could, but kind of like, "Oh, that means they're hungry. Oh, that means this.
Mhm.
Oh, that means that." I'm like, that sounded exactly the same.
Yeah, my wife's getting that. She's like, she didn't poo, but she peed. She needs a diaper change. I'm like, huh? What the heck?
And it's just incredible that, again, to me, I believe you are so incredibly smart, and then we just slowly, yes, we gain knowledge, but we lose it as we get older.
Hmm.
And it's just it's incredible the things that we can handle and do as humans.
So, kind of switching gears here from anger and generational sins. What is a piece of advice that you give for younger guys listening out there?
I guess for me, it's really understanding or getting to know the person that you're looking to and spend the rest of your life with, right? So I mean, to me, I'm kind of going back to the dating and early years of marriage,
Mm.
to really getting to know the person. Uh, the hard part for me is I always say that sex is the most addictive drug there is, and once that enters into a relationship, it changes every relationship. And so for the young men that are listening, watching, to sit down and kind of go, really understand the girl, the woman you are entering into this relationship with. Who is she? What does she stand for? What's important to her in life? Get to know her parents, because good and bad, we are a reflection of our parents, right? And getting to understand those things. my wife and I, through our marriage classes and doing some mentoring that we've done over the years, we've got to know a lot of couples. And so when we kind of go through that process, it's incredibly amount of damage that our parents do to us. And then again, we pass on into other relationships. Um, and so we have couples that we have met with that kind of sit back and kind of go, this is just who I am. It's like, well, but you weren't like that when we were dating.
Mm.
It's because you didn't invest to know some of those things. Um, and I think that's a very important process of really getting to know them. We started off talking about kids, right? Uh, I knew my wife wanted a big family when we were dating. We talked about kids early on in our dating. I mean, I am 16 years old. She's, 18 at this time. And we're already talking about if we were to get married, this is what we're thinking of for a family. I don't know that many people talk about that. They're like, hey, let's go try, see if we can make a family, and then we'll talk about what that looks like to do that. Um, but it's just really getting to know this person, right? Um, I just see that so often in marriages that my wife and I work with that are struggling marriages, that they just didn't really get to know their spouse before they got married. We have fun together. That's great, right? There was a couple that we worked with way back when that uh, they both got high together, and so they loved that. That was a great life. Well, once one of them got clean, it's like, this life is very different. This is not what I signed up for.
Wow.
Kind of, you changed. Good for you. Your spouse didn't, and now you're. How do you work this out?
Hmm.
So really, kind of getting to know what do you want, right? And it's hard, right, to sit back and kind of go at 18, 19, when you,
Yep.
right, to kind of go, what does our future look like? What do you want to do, right? And to me, one of the worst things is, I want to be a mom. Well, that's easy. We could do that right now. You could become a mom right
Yeah.
now. But what does that really look like? Um, and so to me, it's really understanding the person that you're dating, that you're married to. What does your life look like? Think about 5 year, 10 years down the road. Not saying you have to go, this is the plan and we have to stick to it, but just be dreaming about those things. Um, that to me is a really important part of what do we want, right? What do you want? What do I want? And are we compatible long term? I would tell you, my wife and I are 99.9% opposite people, right? If I say something is white, she says it's black, and we're like, okay, let's live in the gray. And it's like, no, it's white. We got to live in the white, right? This is the right way. And through years of knowledge, learning, if I can see things through her eyes, we win.
Mm.
If I force her to see things through my eyes, we lose.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Well, Matt, it has been a privilege and an honor to get to go through and learn about who you are. We're going to dive into the last question of the show. So one of our favorite things is to always just ask. We think that handing off advice and wisdom is a powerful thing, and one of the reasons we're doing this. So the last question we always ask is just, what is your number one piece of advice when it comes to fatherhood that you'd like to hand on to the show, to the viewers, and anybody else?
I think to me the biggest piece of advice is really to, as a dad, invest in your family. Um, to sit back and say, my family is my priority. I work to provide for my family. Our family, do things together. Um, it's something to me that's been lost in the last few generations of people, including me, but lost in generations of, I work to provide, and then the family just takes care of themselves. The more you invest, the more you will, the return is incredible. I say, I love the relationship that I have with my adult children today, because we talk about all kinds of things, right? Um, I talk often to them about their job, about their marriage, about their family, about what's kind of going on, not as I am the supreme, hey, I know what's going on. To sit back and I go, how are you doing in these things? How can I help encourage you to do more? Um, so I think to me it is the investment into your family, which is time, not always money, right? When
Mm-hmm.
people think of invest, they think of money. It's time. It's being there. Something I don't do very good anymore with my aches and pains and all my body issues is getting on the floor and playing with the kids. One of the best things you can do as a dad is get on the floor and play with your kids, right? Look them eye to eye. They are not your equal because you are the parent. You are there to teach and discipline and love, but yet be eye to eye so that, hey, we are talking together. I'm not talking down to you. We're talking together. Um, they are our generation, right? That's what's going to get us to wherever we need to go, because at some point I am going to need more and more help. I need help already, but I need more and more help as time goes on. If I don't have that relationship with my kids, then I'm that grumpy old man sitting in my chair and I can't get out of it, and there's nobody coming to see me to say, hey, what can I do for you?
Thank you again, Matt, so much for hopping on the podcast with us. We appreciate you sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. And thank you guys so much for listening.
If you guys enjoyed this interview, be sure to like and subscribe down below. Give us a follow. And if you got anything that you got out of Matt's that you want to share, give us a comment. Let us know what stuck out to you. Matt gave us a ton of incredible advice on this show. So let us know what your number one takeaway from his interview was that's going to help you as being a better father. And until next time, guys,
Keep fighting the good fight.